beast, whose hour come round at last, slouches toward Bethlehem to be born. In an aftermath of a terrorist attack, as I outlined in previous videos related to this playlist, what could be the potentiality for the government in the federal, local, and state areas? What are the proposals for restriction and reform? As you know, another terrorist attack means that in order to guarantee our safety, some changes are needed. Changes that will infringe on your civil liberties. I want to talk about these proposals in this video. A terrorist attack like the one I have outlined would make, I think, 7 changes. One of them, the first one, is immigration reform. Now, this is a very hot topic now. And it's also a very divisive topic between the Democrat and Republican parties. For those who are suggesting that Biden is the one who allowed for open borders, didn't realize that the previous Trump administration, in his final half of the administration, Trump allowed more people to cross the border than Biden did in the first half. But in his second administration, Trump had acted quickly on his campaign promise to focus on immigration, including aggressively pursuing removal of non-citizens and pressuring states and localities to cooperate in immigration enforcement, and also limiting access to humanitarian forms of relief and closing the southern border, to name just a few actions to date. Promises he didn't keep in the first administration, but like Al-Qaeda, Trump learned from his mistakes. And through a series of executive orders and policy memoranda and other actions related to the legislative and executive branches, the Trump administration is taking major steps to reshape immigration policy and practice that test the limits of his executive power. Now, in the aftermath of a terrorist attack, the first thing that we look forward is we don't look inward, we look outward. But in this case, there's going to be a lot of looking inward. And it's not a Trump proposal, but it's a proposal that's been around for a long time. And that is the people that will suffer the most are poor people and minorities. And in this case, it'll be basically blamed on non-immigrants, people that entered the country illegally. And as we're seeing today, people who are here legally in the definitions of the Constitution, in the First Amendment, people have been deported out of the country, people that have been engaging in getting their, or in the process of getting their green card, or having their green card, a temporary visa. We have seen a rise in overt racism. And from my opinion, just looking at YouTube alone, much less Rumble and Odyssey and BitChute, but YouTube, I'm starting to see a minority of channels that are talking about African Americans and Spanish Americans. The far right, have been demonizing Muslims, and there's a small minority demonizing Jews. So there's a lot of political and religious and racial disparity on display these last 6 months than I have seen in the previous 2. But and this is basically coming from a culture war that's happening in Europe and here in the United States, not realizing that this is all set up to basically divide you within human ideological indifferences. The second proposal, I think, will be a very aggressive tactic to restrict or to reform the Second Amendment. Now, this is a really big issue. One, I am pro Second Amendment because I believe that the public should have access to guns, and more guns should be made available against a government that I am for in the elimination of. I think the government is evil. That's why I don't participate in the voting process. Now, reforming the Second Amendment is a complex issue with a variety of proposed approaches ranging from repealing the amendment entirely, which is what Gavin Newsom was talking about in California, to implementing stricter gun control measures. Now, look, I'm not saying that everybody should have a gun, but I think there should be proper identification for people who have weapons. But I think by repealing the Second Amendment, you're suggesting that, and I'm talking about the alt left here, the fanatics who are basically against the freedom to possess weapons. You people don't realize that the very agencies that are killing more people aren't, in the conservative circles or even in the criminal circles. They are from the federal government, as well as local and state governments. We're talking about law enforcement. We're talking about the military acting on orders of their higher ups or engaging other people that don't warrant a lethal response. Now, there's significant debate on whether the Second Amendment protects an individual's rights to own guns for self-defense, or it primarily applies to militias. But if you read the Second Amendment very carefully, the founding fathers are talking about tyranny, not talking about militias. They're not talking about people, but back then we didn't have really much in the way of standing armies. The armies are under the control of the federal government. But in terms of militias, which were outlawed under the Dick Act, militias basically were the only means of defense against tyrannical governments. But now we don't have a legal militia anymore in the United States. And there's a reason why, is because the government wants to have power over you, not you power over it. Now, current legal interpretations, particularly those stemming from the Supreme Court's Heller and McDonald decisions, which have greatly affirmed an individual's right to possess firearms for traditionally lawful purposes, including defense in the home where it deserves. But I think in this case, when there's a massive terrorist attack, which I'm predicting, and that the primary weapon that's going to be of use is going to be machine guns or handguns or a combination of bombs, this is going to cause an outrage, saying that, look, we need to stop immigration. We need to regulate or reform the Second Amendment entirely. Now, this is the one amendment that is basically, it says that cannot be reformed under any circumstances. And they knew that by doing this and restricting your right to have arms, to defend yourself against a tyrannical government. Now, who here watching this video doesn't believe that the government isn't tyrannical at this point? Look at what they're fucking doing overseas. I mean, really, ladies and gentlemen, right? Now, like I said, I'm for a person possessing a weapon if they have the proper documentation. All right, you can't just hand out guns left and right. We live in a very different time than we did, 300 years ago. Nevertheless, the idea of having access to weapons to defend yourself against a tyrannical government is what the Second Amendment was all about. Another proposal would be limited restrictions on public access to certain areas of major cities. If what I think is going to happen and that multiple cities are going to be affected, and I'm not talking about small town America. This is not Red Dawn. We're talking about big cities. Having limited access to public areas, this goes back to the COVID restrictions. There'll be this is what I think COVID was, which basically a test to see if whether or not the public will go along with these restrictions and having less access to certain areas. And we failed fucking miserably. Now, in this case, it'll be seen as warranted because people will say, well, we shouldn't have access to here and here. We can't trust anybody. Well, I'm thinking that maybe sporting events, um, areas of large congregations, Grand Central, um, they'll be acting in accordance with like laws that don't exist. They'll just make them up, saying that you need a special ID card or a special card to go into this area. We need to prove who you are. Can't just let anybody walk in here. So that means anybody without a green card, anybody that's in this country illegally, and in the case of trying to, um, you know, get access to an application for a green card to stay in the country, well, we don't care about these people. We need them out of the country. We can't trust nobody right now. And so I think this will basically be about controlling the masses in regards to the poor and minorities, as I said before. Everybody's going to get the blank check here. I mean, the shaft here, except for those who have the proper identification, which means that, and this is something I'm going to bring up a little bit later, in that you're going to have local, federal, and state governments acting all in accordance that only people with the documentation that we now think that we now provide as valid, which means that your ID card isn't enough. You're going to need another like form of ID, whether it's a card or a chip or whatever, or a fob, that has certain access. You got to prove. Are you an American? Do you live in New York? Where do you live? Where is this and that? All right. And it has to show. And this will bring about employment for the private military industrial complex, private security contractors, public security contractors, exploding right through the roof. Because after terrorism, what goes through who hires the most? Law enforcement and security. And we have plenty of those, but we're going to have a lot more in a smaller, more condensed area of the cities. That's what I mean. Controlling our movements. That's what COVID was about. It was a test, and we failed. And then you'll have another proposal, I think, will be media manipulation to thwart the blame to, obviously, I think, Iran and Lebanon. We're not engaging in a war with Iran. As you could see, that basically was a tit for tat, like I said in previous videos. We're not going to be in a full-out war. This will allow for Israel and the Gulf under the bin Salman family and King Abdullah of Jordan to basically push for the removal of Lebanon and Iran completely. Get rid of the governments by force through the military, just like we did with Iraq. We blamed Iraq for 9/11. It was an illegal war. How many people were killed? Anywhere between 1 million to 1.5 million. What was proposed in these countries? Well, Iraqi Provisional Order number 1, Iraqi Provisional Order number 2, under El Pobrim, which was the dissolution of the military and law enforcement, which led to sectarian violence and civil war later on under Iraqi President Noor al-Maliki, which we saw the rise of the Islamic State and of Iraq. I think with the elimination of the mullahs in Iran, and of course, Lebanon, Hezbollah will be completely destroyed. This would be a disaster from top to bottom. It will actually be a war that will span maybe more than 5 years. I think so, well more than 5 years. Anyway, I said if we went to war with Iran, it would be anywhere between 5 to 8 years. They're not Iraq. They're not Afghanistan. They're not Syria. They're not Libya. the Persians will fight, and many thousands would die if we enter uh, in a foot uh, more of a military uh, army type of situation. Will it be a drone war? Sure, but who will die more? Citizens. Um, Another proposal will be the National Intelligence Services to expand its authority to local governments. This will allow for a greater expansion for the intelligence services to basically gain more power over city and local governments. And intelligence sharing initiatives, such as fusion centers, which are centers that serve as hubs for receiving, analyzing, and disseminating uh, the current threat information between federal, state, and local uh, cities and governments, providing vital local context to the overall, national threat picture. Agencies like the National Criminal Intelligence Sharing Plan, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and what these basically do, well, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, is the FBI partners with local law enforcement to video surveillance capability. Now, if you think we have cameras now, it'll be worse, because in the aftermath of a terrorist attack that I think would happen, you'll have cameras maybe basically inside private structures, basically, where we might even implement, and this will be actually proposed to the public, in maybe having access to your homes. Now, I know that's a lot invasive there, and that's a really daring proposal, but I don't think it's going to be invasive. Like, they're not going to force it. They're going to see how far they can get away with it. But I do think that, cameras will be on every single block. And it'll be basically really invasive, full body scanners, stuff like this. And then, the benefits of this collaboration for the intelligence services in every facet of the country, they'll share their early warning and threat migration, which are timely intelligence sharing reports about rapid response to emerging threats and enhancing security, whether it's from, the state or the regional, the intercontinental United States. And this will basically be much more condensed, much more broader in terms of, not condensed, but broader in its authority. And if you think it's bad now, it's going to get much worse. I mean, this is really bad. Like I said, I could be dead wrong. This is really why I do these videos, to basically try, maybe prepare you for the worst. And of course, you'll get it from the director, the CIA, the FBI, and we're doing this for improved national security, where interagency collaboration that fosters communication and fosters coordination for a far more effective response to threats. Hey, listen, we really got to get down and dirty. We need to basically ensure the safety of Americans. And by doing this, we need to infringe on your civil liberties. It's basically going to come right down to sharing personal data with even the private fields, private military, private security firms, where they would need warrants for it. They don't need that with the FBI and the CIA anymore, or the NSA. But now imagine local law enforcement having that power. We don't need warrants to enter your home. You know when that happened? The Boston Marathon bombing. Does anybody remember that? Do you remember that small town? I forgot the name of the town, where the basically police, I have video of this. And I was fucking flabbergasted when they would enter homes without a warrant to look for one skinny fucking dude that had an access to a handgun or a rifle. I mean, they were going into homes, for God's sakes, to ensure that he wasn't in the home. One guy. It's basically a test to see what they fucking could get away with. And because it was some small town in Massachusetts, nobody really gave a shit. Oh, they did it for our safety. There were fucking people clapping afterwards when they got, I think his name was Dokazar Snardev. They were fucking celebrating in the streets. And meanwhile, they're having their civil liberties violated. Oh, the police need to get in to check to see if you have weapons. And it's not used for, this kid who was basically trying to shoot up the whole town. I mean, for fucking God's sakes, something like this, people will be applauding. Yes, go into the houses of that, family we think are Muslim. Go into that house that this Mexican family that shouldn't be here. Go into their homes and check. We don't know. They could have bombs. They could have guns. We can't trust these people anymore. And that's where you're going to be. And believe me when I say this, this will be a frenzied mindset where you're not going to trust your fellow man. Now, you may say, oh, that immigrant's not my fellow man. Yes, he fucking is. Because once you start disassociating from each other, you become less human. Well, we need border security. I'm for it. But the First Amendment protects those in the country with our laws. You get rid of that, and you're applauding it already. After a terrorist attack like this, you'll be fucking wanting these people to go to El Salvador to live out the rest of their lives because they were just here without a green card and that they might pose a threat. Another proposal I think would happen will be the overall public psyche and ideological divide that will follow. And I think that's fucking obvious. I mean, we're already looking at immigrants in this country as, less than human. And it's not a majority yet. And it's a very small minority, but the idea is there. And I think it was hanging around for a while, but now it's more pronounced. I mean, with the Trump administration, this proposal, the hard right, I mean, the very alt right, are basically existing because of the fanatics of the left that basically just flaunted uh, the violation of the law through, local law, specifically local areas of government where we're going to take people were saying, oh, they're taking our jobs and taking our homes where we can't afford apartments, and these people are basically stealing our jobs. Listen, it's not their fault. It's your government's fault. They did this to ferment this hatred, to ferment this reliance on getting stuff for free, because it will cause an outrage. Right, as I said, the famous Saul Alinsky quote, the action is in the reaction. All the government needs to do is make a little bit of a push. You're going to go fucking right overboard. A terrorist attack like this, you're going to name every immigrant as a fucking threat right off the bat. Look at what New York did in the aftermath of 9/11. In the hours after 9/11, and I lived on the border of Brooklyn, Queens at the time, and there was a story I heard that wasn't too far from where I live, where there was this one. It was an Italian guy, a middle-aged man, that set fire to a Sikh individual because he had the turban on. They set fire to him at a gas station. When that happened, and it made news, and this is when I was going out to clubs and stuff. We would go to these gas stations and fill up the car and go out. You would have these guys who were Indian, not even Muslim, wearing American hats to show that they were in solidarity. Hey, we're Americans too. They were that fucking afraid. If a terrorist attack like I've outlined in previous videos happens, you're going to fucking go out in the streets and basically look for every immigrant and point them out to the police and just say, look, these people are a threat. We think they're bombs, and we think we got to invade on their civil liberties. You're going to be applauding this. And God forbid for the Islamic community, they're all going to get demonized. And that happened in the years afterwards with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, even violating the rights of Muslim Americans that were here in the country legally. Now imagine the ones illegally. Oh my God. The racism will be through the fucking roof. the fucking groypers will be up in arms. They'll be, all those, the Charlie Kirks and the fucking Steven Crowders, the Nick Fuentes, and all these lowlives, Ben Shapiro. They'll get right on you. The culture war will be at an all-time high, like never seen before. They'll have you ratting on each other, fucking hurting. Like they would be, it would be. And I hate to go overboard because I'm not a sensationalist, but these videos make me, expand a little bit more on that, right? Because I'm always thinking the worst, like a terrorist attack, like with 100 people shooting up streets, dressed as either cops or the protesters, or a combination of both. You won't know which way to turn. And then afterwards, the media will say, look, it was Muslims and it was, a combination of the left's fault for having open borders. Oh my God. Can you imagine what that would do? Just use your head, just like, oh my God. Would I think it'll be a civil war? No, I'm not going that far. But the culpability of sporadic violence is not an extremist thought, because we're that close. And the final proposal will be that, and this is something I touched on a little bit before with the limited restriction of public access, will be popular spots such as bridges, sporting venues, and very popular local city areas such as museums, or like 42nd Street, or the Golden Gate Bridge, or Sears Tower, something of this nature. They will implement a specific ID certification access card. This is what I touched on a little bit, but I want to talk more about this because we have a card here in New York that is for immigrants. Yes, we do. We have an application card for immigrants that can't get a national ID card. And but I think with something like this, both the Democrats and Republicans both will actually push for this, and that they'll implement a special ID card which will have additional information on it, more personal information. What's your religion? Who did what party did you vote for? I could see that happening. I mean, is it a stretch? Sure. But it would basically, like, I could see like something of this nature. Maybe let's not go that far, but I could see something of that nature where you get your card scanned, your face scanned, your eyes scanned, your retina scanned, something of this. Like, it doesn't have to be let's just say it doesn't have to be an ID card. It could be a face scan. It could be an eye scan. More personal information. This is what they have in Europe and in Asia, actually. I think in Japan they have this, or China, like a face scanning technique. I mean, we're that close. We got to prove who you are. And we need all the information we get about you specifically. That's what it's about. This is about who you are. Now, you may say, well, we have this on our phones. Yes, we do. But we don't have like that facial recognition access, finger recognition access. We need more additional information. That's what this is going to be about. But just it's a really concerning thought, because we gave up so much after 9/11, and it just makes me really concerned. And I'm somebody who's not emotionally invested much. I'm very emotionally reserved. I didn't actually be this way. I just am. And as I got older, I became more comfortable in it. But and I'm always like, I'm a hopeless pessimist, and I hate to be this way, but when you look at the world and you access information and knowledge about how certain things are, and most of it's very derogatory and detrimental to mental health. It's just like, this is not the way the world is supposed to be. But if a terrorist attack like what I think is going to happen, like something like this would make the whole country just great. And that we would basically, instead of, whereas 9/11, the enemy was outward, now the enemy's inward. It hasn't been pronounced yet. And with this terrorist incident that I think is coming, it will make us look at each other like we can't trust one another. After 9/11, we looked at the Islamic world as the enemy. And that lasted even to now. I mean, we still have people now that, just specifically blame Muslims, all Muslims, their religion is not compatible for the United States. I mean, we have people like this. But if something like this happens, where you have like 100 to 200 operatives just shooting up and bombing bridges and stuff like that, and they're dressed like everyday Americans, like as soldiers or as hospital workers or as military or as protesters shooting at police, military, you won't know which way, who to run and where to. You won't know who to trust. And with that confusion and comes fear, and with fear comes violence, our base primitive instincts. Because what we can't see and don't know, we react very violently. And in something like this, cooler heads need to prevail. I mean, even under the most tumultuous of circumstances. And with this, many people would die. And it would paralyze the country, paralyze our movements, and set back our cognitive thinking, put it in a state of confusion. And you don't think clearly. You don't act reasonably. And guess who benefits from this? The governments. Because they'll basically come to you as your friend at that time and say, look, we're going to mourn for you. We're going to pray for you. But in doing this, we need to implement some security measures that may feel invasive, but they are needed to keep you safe. And in that situation, and this will come in immediate aftermath, and basically most people are still not over, what they just went through because it's trauma, they'll basically agree with it without any fight or resistance whatsoever. It took us almost, a year to basically get out of the funk and, protest against, it took us a year, no, almost 2 years, a full 2 years to start protesting against the war in Iraq, which was proposed in the hours after 9/11. It took us 2 years to finally say, hey, wait a minute, that's not right. We can't afford that this time around. And so that's what I think would happen in the aftermath of a terrorist attack, as, egregious and as personal as this one, which would be more widespread as opposed to the visual effects of the terrorism that we saw. And not many, we aren't up in the air, we're not on a plane, but if it happens on the ground where everyone is, it becomes much more personable and much more traumatic. And it all depends on our reaction, because the action is in the reaction. Hey, listen, really, thank you very much for watching these videos. And I know you must be thinking, God, this guy, he's got some problems. But sure, I got my own, dark thoughts, but that's what this playlist is about. Whereas in other videos, I'm basically straight edged and giving you the information as is. Whereas this, in this playlist setting, I'm much more open and relaxed in my predictions and thoughts and speculation and my scenarios, which are based on, my my views upon what's happening in the real world. And it's No, everybody wants to have, good thoughts, happy thoughts, and that's good, but we also got to prepare for the worst. And that's what these videos are about. They're not to basically depress you. And yeah, it's depressing, but it's also made to keep you invigorated and secure. It's not meant to basically break you and say, what's the point of living? We might as well just stay in our homes and never go out. No, that's not the point. The point is remain vigilant and remain clear-headed. And that's what I want for you. Thank you very much for watching the video, and have a good weekend, everybody.